Hello, and thank you for joining us today to learn more about GFI's Research Grant Program. We're very excited to share more information about our 2025 request for proposals. By joining this webinar, you're taking an excellent first step down the pathway to success. In terms of our agenda for today, we'll start by providing an overview of GFI's Research Grant Program before diving into the specifics of our two funding priority areas. After that, we'll share more information on how to apply before opening it up for questions. First, some housekeeping information. Please be aware that all participant lines have been muted. If you have any questions during our presentation today, please submit them using the question and answer box displayed at the bottom of your screen. To help out our moderators, when submitting your questions, please follow the formatting examples displayed on the screen. If you prefer to ask your question via email, then please direct it to us at rfp@gfi.org. Additionally, it's worth mentioning that this webinar content has been pre-recorded. If you're watching this recording during one of our information sessions, then we'll have a live question and answer session following this presentation. Depending on the specific session you're attending, the team members that will address your questions during our Q&A may be different than those featured within this presentation. These dedicated global members have graciously volunteered their time to enable additional information sessions, and we're incredibly grateful for their support. I'd like to quickly introduce myself. My name is Elisha, and I'm proud to serve as GFI's new Research Grant Program Manager. I'll be introducing you to GFI and our Research Grant Program today. The Good Food Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit developing the roadmap for a sustainable, secure, and just protein supply. Powered by philanthropy, GFI is an international network of organizations advancing alternative proteins as an essential solution needed to meet the world's climate, global health, food security, and biodiversity goals. We have earned GuideStar's 2024 Platinum Seal of Transparency, which is an honor obtained by less than 1% of nonprofits. Our organization employs over 200 team members across the globe with 3 key programmatic departments. Our science and technology team, which includes today's presenters, serves to advance foundational, open access research in alternative proteins and create a thriving research and training ecosystem. Our corporate engagement team focuses on driving investment, accelerating innovation, and scaling the supply chain. Through their collaborations, these efforts are executed faster than market forces alone would allow. Lastly, our policy team advocates for fair policy and public research funding for alternative proteins, and together we play a unique role and uplift stakeholders across the alternative protein landscape. Through our research grant program, we support essential early to mid-stage research proposals designed to solve many of the most timely and pertinent challenges facing alternative protein technologies. We seek to create open access tools and methods for the development of appetizing, affordable, and widely available alternative protein products. Our research grant program is dedicated to achieving 3 core objectives: addressing technical bottlenecks, unlocking and catalyzing further research funding, and fostering collaborations to attract new talent to the field. To achieve these goals, we annually release requests for proposals inviting open access research focused on enhancing organoleptic properties, reducing costs, and scaling up alternative proteins. GFI established our research grant program in 2018, an effort made possible by the incredible generosity of GFI's philanthropic supporters. Since our launch, we have provided yearly opportunities for researchers to apply for rapidly deployed funding, which have gone on to support 129 projects across 25 countries by providing over $24 million in research grant funding. As previously mentioned, we're firm in our dedication to advance foundational, open access research for wide-scale use. Thus, we formulated our grant agreement in such a way to enable this effort. Though GFI encourages information sharing, we do not prohibit the generation of intellectual property or its protection. Our intellectual property terms vary based on organization type. We provide an additional lay summary of our intellectual property terms within the RFP's FAQ section. We highly encourage all prospective applicants to review our standard grant agreement, which is linked within the RFP, as they prepare to submit their proposals. This year, we're offering up to $3.5 million for our 2025 RFP cycle to support innovative open access research across 2 priority areas: Priority A is addressing functionality from fermentation ingredients for plant-based meats. For this topic, we are asking for proposals to identify and characterize fermentation-derived ingredients that enhance alternative protein-based meat products to increase their adoption through improved taste, lowered cost, and nutritional benefits. Priority B is pathways to propel cell line development. This topic includes 3 potential pathways: crustacean, fish, and terrestrial. We are asking for proposals to advance cell line development to bolster innovation and strengthen open access research tools for the cultivated meat ecosystem. Now I'll hand it over to Adam to share a little bit more about Priority A. Adam?
Thank you, and good day, everybody. Thank you for your interest in our research grants program. And today I'm going to talk you through our 2025 funding Priority A, functionality from fermentation, ingredients for plant-based meats. My name is Adam Lehman, and I'm a principal scientist in fermentation here at GFI. So we know that in the future world of alternative protein formulations, that ingredients will come from a variety of sources. In our research, we often split alternative proteins into 3 main pillars: plant-based proteins, fermentation-derived proteins, and cultivated meat. However, we know that many formulations will and do include ingredients from other pillars to achieve functionality, nutrition, and organoleptic properties. For example, we know that fermentation-derived ingredients are used as growth factors for cultivated meat. And we know that fermentation-derived enzymes can be used in plant protein processing to improve that protein functionality. However, we believe that most future and next generation end products will contain ingredients from another pillar. And these can include ingredients such as flavorings, an additional source of protein for nutrition or functionality, and fats. And we believe that fermentation can provide these. Plant-based meats have attractive nutritional profiles and range from partially to mostly mimicking the organoleptic properties of animal-based meats. Taste, texture, mouthfeel, cooking transition behavior, such as a change in color from red to a more cooked brown, aroma, and other characteristics have greatly improved over the past decade. But how can we improve on any one of these specific organoleptic challenges further? We believe that fermentation-derived ingredients have reached a maturity and a diversity where they should allow for increased functionality for plant-based meats. In a timely publication, Nectar has released this month the Taste of the Industry 2025 report. And I encourage you to read this report. And on page 17, you can see that there's a quote that asks for increased upstream innovation in ingredients or processing to close the gap on functionality and organoleptics, increasing the sensory appeal of plant-based meats in many different types of meat formulations, such as nuggets, burgers, sausages, bacon, etc. And we know that fermentation has long filled roles in increasing the functionality for foods. Taking an example of heme binding proteins that bind the iron binding molecule heme, we can use recombinant protein platforms, precision fermentation, to produce this key molecule that can improve ingredient functionality and plant-based meats like plant-based burgers and formulations like that. We also know that we can use metabolic engineering to produce volatile compounds that are identical to those given off by cooking meat. So you can imagine recapitulating the aromas and textures and even sounds of meat cooking with these novel compounds. We can also improve the taste and texture of plant-based meats through new fats and new fat encapsulation methods, which allow for plant-based meats to hold on to the fats that are included in those formulations and deliver that fat taste, texture, and aroma that come along with retaining those fats. We can also use microbes to biofortify particular formulations by keeping higher levels of vitamins or minerals in those ingredients and then passing them on to that final end product. An example of where precision fermentation has increased product formulation is with the fermentation-derived soy ligaboglobin protein. Precision fermentation-derived soy ligaboglobin was approved by the FDA in 2019 and is an important ingredient for plant-based ground meat from Impossible Foods. This is a molecule that you can see here, the 3D structure, It's an ingredient that adds iron content by binding and delivering heme and iron to plant-based food formulations. It provides a meatier taste, and it also undergoes an oxidation-mediated color change when cooked, going from a red to a cooked brown color. And we believe that other proteins, flavor molecules, and fatty acids may similarly improve plant-based formulations in other ways. Biomass-derived protein, such as mycoprotein, provides texture and protein concentration to alternative meat and dairy. Although in this particular funding priority A, we are not funding alternative dairy at this time. However, mycoprotein's particular attributes make it an attractive choice for meats. It has long fiber structure that's made via filamentous fungi, and it often has high protein content, sometimes around 30% dry weight for its ingredient formulation. While alternative dairy products have been commercialized with a mixture of plant-based and fermentation-derived ingredients, fewer efforts have been made to use mycoprotein or other single-cell proteins as a plant-based meat ingredient. Fundamental research could provide insight into how single-cell proteins can improve plant-based meats. And here from this review by Thomas Linder, What's Next for Mycoprotein, we can see commercial examples of where mycoprotein has been used in formulations. However, only in the plant-based and fermentation-derived yogurt shown in panel D do we see a mixture of plant-based and fermentation-derived ingredients that significantly increase the protein content, but also the organoleptic appeal of that alternative yogurt. So what are we looking for our funding priority A, functionality for fermentation? First, we are looking for proposals to articulate the challenge for plant-based meats that they seek to solve or to improve, and then to describe how the inclusion of a fermentation-derived ingredient addresses this need. GFI encourages innovations related to biomass and/or precision fermentation ingredients that improve plant-based alternative meat formulations. I'm just going to walk through two examples. Biomass fermentation, where whole cell mass is inactivated, dewatered, and texturized to provide a high protein content cell biomass, can be added to alternative protein meat products as a high protein ingredient. It could also act as a binding ingredient, or it could be optimized to drive flavors such as umami or provide meat-like textures. Within an alternative protein meat, biomass-derived protein could complement plant-based ingredients by diversifying the amino acid content of end products and providing essential amino acids that can be rare in some plant-based protein ingredients. And to date, precision fermentation-derived ingredients such as globin proteins have been formulated successfully to improve the iron binding and organoleptics of alt protein meats. There's an opportunity for other precision fermentation-derived proteins or other ingredients to specifically increase the appeal and enable the production of AP meats, such as alternatives to egg white protein binding ingredients that are sometimes available in alternative proteins formulations. These precision fermentation-derived ingredients could enable improved binding, water and fat retention, texture, aroma, taste, or nutritional value, such as mineral delivery like iron, zinc, magnesium, etc., for meat alternatives. So what are we looking for our proposals? Again, proposals should address end product formulation, characterization of those end products or the ingredient to be used in the end product, and research plans for experimental assessment of fermentation-derived ingredients used in plant-based meat formulations. Examples include, but are not limited to, nutritional content, digestibility, functional properties, and food science applications such as emulsification, gelation, water and oil holding capacity, biochemical biophysical properties like the color, the salt content, or other molecular values, sensory appeal, and food safety. Successful proposals must articulate which ingredient that falls within the above guidelines will be the focus of the project, with a specific target meat alternative end product formulation and assessment. We're looking for the food formulation challenge to be articulated and for the investigations to relate to the functionality and/or organoleptics that you seek to improve. Then we would like to know the approaches that you will specifically investigate on how the particular ingredient will address that food formulation challenge that you describe. And then we would like a clear description of the ingredient's potential as an available ingredient to address the identified organoleptic and functional challenge. These ingredients used should be ingredients that are possible to produce, that could be potentially produced at scale within the next few years, that would make this an appropriate solution for the plant-based meat space. Next, We would like to describe the types of proposals that we are not looking for our funding priority A for 2025. First, we will not consider proposals that focus on cultivated meat ingredients that either are going to be derived from or used in animal cell cultures to produce cultivated meat products. We are not looking for ingredients aimed at animal feed applications. We are not looking for proposals focused on ingredients used as high-protein flours for other food applications beyond meat alternatives. This can include alternative proteins that could be formulated into pastas, bakery, protein supplements, or confections. We are not looking for formulations focused directly on alternative dairy, meat, or cheese products. We are not seeking ingredients that rely on the transformation or conversion of animal-derived products by microbial fermentation. Examples of this could include fermentations driven by animal-derived lactose or whey protein. And we're not looking for proposals using animal-derived ingredients or upstream feedstocks and inputs. We're also not looking for proposals focused solely on the production of microbially derived fats. And lastly, we are not seeking proposals focused on R&D, scale-up, or production of the ingredient. For topic A, GFI seeks to advance R&D on improving the organoleptic properties of meat alternatives through formulation with enabling fermentation ingredients. We're looking for proposals centered on food science, specifically the formulation and characterization of these ingredients in meat alternative applications. While ingredient production and bioprocessing are critical R&D areas, this RFP focuses on end product development to enhance taste, texture, and other sensory qualities. Projects may include ingredient production and modifications that improve the ingredient, but the primary emphasis must be on integrating and characterizing the ingredient into meat alternative formulations and applications. Next, we'd like to share some resources that you can use in advancing your proposal. So please check out the Nectar Taste of the Industry report that I described. Also, there are several publications here which give examples of a review from GFI on precision fermentation food ingredients, but also other examples of where precision fermentation and biomass fermentation ingredients could provide functionality to plant-based foods. And lastly, I'd just like to share some examples of past work that has been funded by GFI that fills some highly similar roles. So you can see more at gfi.org/grants. And next, I'd like to turn it over to my colleagues in Cultivated Meat to describe funding priority B. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Hi, everyone. My name's Claire. I'm one of the cultivated meat scientists at GFI. And I will be presenting funding priority B along with my colleague Manasa from our APAC affiliate office. All right, so our focus for this particular priority is cell line development for cultivated meat for 3 different species groups, so crustaceans, fish, and terrestrial animals. We have some slightly different considerations for the 3 of those, which we'll get into. All right, so the main challenge that we're addressing here is the lack of available cell lines with desirable characteristics that we would want for research and commercial purposes for cultivated meat. And this is really a persistent bottleneck that that's holding us back, not just from commercializing cultivated meat products, but also from doing a lot of the more sort of basic level research that needs to happen in academia to build up the foundation for this whole industry to exist. And so depending on the species you're working with, the level of challenge and what we think is likely to be feasible in 2 years will be a little bit different. And so to reflect that, we've customized the core objectives for each of these 3 pathways. And also, depending on the species focus of your work, we may also encourage or require the inclusion of a secondary objective on top of the core objectives. And so Manas is going to explain a little bit more about what those secondary objectives might be later on. But the basic idea is that we would like you to take things a step beyond just developing or optimizing a cell line and use that cell line to enable further experiments that will solve another downstream problem in cultivated meat or seafood. So pathway 1, we've divided this topic into 3 separate pathways. So pick the one you're focusing on and kind of focus on the criteria for those because they will be a little bit different. Pathway 1 focuses on developing and optimizing myoblasts or myosatellite cells from crustaceans. And so because there's been less foundational research done on crustacean cell culture up to this point, the core objectives for this pathway are the simplest of the three. So the first core objective for this pathway is simply to develop a continuous myogenic line and to demonstrate its differentiation to muscle cells. The second core objective focuses on media development. And so since we realized that achieving fully serum-free media may be a little bit overambitious for a 2-year project on top of the cell line development angle, we're very much open to approaches to reducing serum in the media as opposed to completely eliminating it as a first step, especially for crustacean projects. And through the third core objective, we're seeking to provide an opportunity for researchers to help improve the field's understanding of really what cell line stability means. So currently there's a little bit of a lack of international consensus and guidance on how cell line stability may be defined, its applicability and suitability within the context of food safety, and the type of data or best practices that are sufficient to demonstrate it. So we encourage you to sort of put on your evidence-based thinking hats to develop an experimental strategy to define and show that your cell line is genotypically and phenotypically stable. And finally, the fourth objective focuses on continuing efforts to improve the accessibility of cell lines. So what this means is you are required to bank or deposit your cell line in a repository of your choice, as well as add it as an entry into GFI's cell line database. Secondary objectives for this pathway are completely optional, since, as I mentioned, we realize you may have your work cut out for you with the core objectives. So you're welcome to include a secondary objective if you think you can manage it, but the main thing we're looking for here is projects that have a really solid chance of succeeding on the core objectives. So my advice would be to please be mindful of that when deciding whether to include a secondary objective or not. Pathway 2 focuses on developing and optimizing either myoblasts or myosatellite cells or adipogenic progenitors from fish. So the first core objective for this pathway focuses on the development and optimization of the cell line and media. And so as with the first pathway that we just talked about, we're looking for a continuous line that can differentiate into the relevant cell types. So in this case, that would mean muscle or fat, and also at least some first steps toward reducing the serum content needed in the media. It doesn't necessarily have to get all the way to serum-free for this one. One new thing we're asking for in this pathway is adaptation of the cell line to grow in either suspension or 3D culture systems, as well as efforts to bring down the doubling time, ideally before 24 hours if you can manage it, but we realize that that might be asking a lot. As with Pathway 1, the last two objectives focus on defining and assessing genotypic and phenotypic stability, and on ensuring that the cell line that's developed through this project is broadly accessible to the cultivated seafood community, so depositing it in a repository. For Pathway 2, we strongly encourage you to include a secondary objective if feasible. However, we recognize that this could be a little ambitious depending on the other details of your project. So this is still considered optional. And as with Pathway 1, if you're not sure if you'll be able to pull off a secondary objective, I would advise erring on the side of having a really solid plan for the core objectives. Try not to spread yourself too thin by picking an overly ambitious secondary objective. Consider kind of the trade-offs that might come with that. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague Manasa to talk about Pathway 3.
Thank you, Claire. Hi, everyone. Pathway 3 focuses on developing and optimizing continuous cell lines from terrestrial species across several different cell types. The core objectives laid out for this pathway build on those that you saw in the previous slides for Pathways 1 and 2. The first core objective is to ensure that the developed cell line possesses characteristics that are deemed important for scaling cultivated meat production. These characteristics include growth in serum-free media, growth in suspension or other 3D culture formats with a short doubling time, ideally less than or equal to 24 hours, differentiation down myogenic and adipogenic lineages, and growth in feeder-free conditions for embryonic stem cells and induced pluripotent stem cell lines. The second and third core objectives are consistent with the other two pathways. you are required to develop an experimental strategy to define and show that your cell line is genotypically and phenotypically stable, and also bank your cell line in a repository of your choice, together with adding it as an entry onto GFI's cell line database. In contrast to pathways 1 and 2, addressing a secondary objective in addition to the core objectives listed here is essential if you pick pathway 3. I'd like to now go into a little bit more detail about the secondary objectives. The purpose of our requirement to address a complementary secondary objective is to provide an avenue to push your research a step beyond just creating another cell line. We are keen to drive the so what of your research. So after you develop your line, how can you actually use it to advance the field? What downstream research question or bottleneck can your cell line help answer or alleviate? With this in mind, we have provided a list of suggested secondary objectives in the RFP, but here are just a few examples that you can consider. 1, identifying an approach to reduce the production or accumulation of toxic waste metabolites in suspension or 3D culture systems without hampering cell line stability. This could be through cell engineering or media recycling, for example. 2, comparing different published protocols or improving methods to enhance proliferation or differentiation down myogenic or adipogenic lineages. 3, collecting dry mass, biomass composition, stoichiometric, and kinetics data from relevant species and cell types grown in different bioreactor environments to inform life cycle assessment and techno-economic assessment modeling. You may propose an objective that is outside of the list provided and consider a problem statement that you feel you are well equipped to tackle based on your expertise and capabilities. However, please ensure that the secondary objectives selected is clearly justified and relevant. It's feasible within the project timeframe and doesn't detract you from fulfilling any of the core objectives listed in your particular pathway. As a reminder, it's optional to address a secondary objective for pathway 1. We strongly encourage it for pathway 2, and it's essential for pathway 3. So ultimately, what are we looking for? Applicants are urged to carefully consider the current state of the science, the commercial relevance, and open access merits of their research. So we're looking for proposals that clearly highlight the pathway, species, and cell types on which you want to focus your research on and why. If your proposal spans more than one pathway, please highlight one of them as your primary focus. Select a complementary secondary objective and justify the rationale as is appropriate for your chosen pathway. Describe the proposed experimental strategies clearly and share supporting preliminary data if you have any. It's not a must, but we would love to see any preliminary supporting information that you may have to achieve the core and secondary objectives. Include a plan to document details related to the provenance of the cell line to the extent that is possible for your chosen species and your cell sourcing method. Some examples of details to include comprise animal health particulars, vaccination history, source tissue type, anatomical location, evidence of veterinarian assessment, and so on. Please include a plan to bank the cell line and showcase a willingness to share it with the cultivated meat and seafood research community. Consider the commercial applicability of your research by highlighting a strategy on how you think the cell line developed will help close the gap for cultivated meat or seafood to market readiness. Lastly, you can outline a plan to document compliance with halal or kosher standards. This is completely optional and is only encouraged if it is feasible and appropriate to do, given your chosen species, cell sourcing method, and experimental approach. This really is a good to have, not compulsory. So please note that proposals will not be disqualified or disadvantaged if this is absent. So what are the sorts of proposals that we would not be considering? The focus is on developing a cell line from a terrestrial fish or crustacean species that is not food relevant, and if the choice of species and cell type is not adequately justified. So to clarify this, cell lines from insects and organisms without a history of large-scale industrial farming or fishing for human consumption, or focus on cell types not relevant to meat or seafood, this could include, say, mammary cells, would be out of scope. Second, any of the core objectives stated for a selected pathway are excluded. A relevant secondary objective is not selected or justified for pathway 3, or proposed experimental strategies are not described adequately. 3, attempt to replace serum with insect hydrolysates or other animal-derived materials. However, proposals aiming to replace serum with albumin as an intermediate step, but not the final step, may be considered. Proposals lack a plan to A, document details related to the provenance of the cell line, and B, bank and share the cell lines developed from this project with the broader cultivated meat and seafood research community. We also would not want to see a situation where the commercial applicability of the research outputs is ignored, so we highly encourage applicants to think about this carefully in your proposals. And finally, if the proposal refuses to acknowledge a willingness to add the cell lines developed from your project to GFI's cell line database, we would not be able to consider that. In the interest of time, I won't go through these one by one, but if you are keen to do some background reading to learn more about this funding topic and the context behind why we've chosen to focus on it this year and how we've thought through it, please check out the list of resources we've provided in the RFP, which is the same as what you see on the slide. These include reports and resources developed within GFI, and as you can see on the next slide, related peer-reviewed journal articles and research projects that we have previously funded on a related topic. With that, I would like to wish our applicants all the very best in preparing your proposals. We look forward to receiving them. And with that, I would like to hand it back to Alicia. Thank you.
Thank you all for that helpful breakdown. I will now walk our audience through our application process. Before getting started with your proposal, please read our RFP linked on our Research Grant Program webpage. Next, please log into our proposal portal. If you've not applied for our grants before, then you will need to create a free user account to get started. To do so, please follow the instructions displayed on the portal homepage. The deadline to submit your application, including all proposal components, is noon Eastern Daylight Time on May 15th, 2025. We will not accept proposals after the submission deadline. It's worth noting that once you have submitted your application, our portal will allow you to access the application and make edits up until our stated deadline. Additionally, we strongly encourage you to take note of our other requirements. Projects may not exceed 24 months, and applicants must be prepared to initiate their projects within 3 to 6 months of the submission deadline. Budgets may not exceed $250,000 US or $300,000 US maximum if your proposal will include a new to the field collaboration as defined within our RFP. All proposals must be written in English and adhere to all stated page limits. I want to be clear that GFI's RFP is available to researchers worldwide, and we encourage all eligible submissions, regardless of your geographical location. We recognize that this requirement means that many prospective applicants may be writing in a non-native language. Please do not let this discourage you from applying, as all proposals will be evaluated based on their scientific merit, not language proficiency. Lastly, in accordance with U.S. law, GFI is unable to consider individuals or organizations currently sanctioned by the United States government for research grant funding. GFI verifies applicant compliance with this requirement during our review process prior to sending any award notices. All applicants are required to agree to provide supplemental information if requested to enable GFI to confirm your compliance with this requirement. The next few slides serve to document the required proposal components. All applicants will be required to provide details about their project, including organizational information, their project title, summary, abstract, key personnel, and information about proposed human subject, animal, and hazardous material use. A document detailing your research design is also required and may not exceed 6 pages. A maximum of 1 page of this document must describe your research team, summarizing their qualifications and background. The remaining 5 pages should be dedicated to describing your project aims, research design, methods, any collaborations, figures, and references. All applicants are required to submit a work plan, which may not exceed 1 page. Your work plan serves to outline your project objectives, milestones, tasks and dependencies included in your research design and should include general timeframes rather than specific dates. All budgets must use GFI's approved budget template, which is linked within the application, to itemize costs by budget category stated in US dollars. Applicants should request the funding required for their project success while building a conservative yet realistic budget. Applicants without collaborations are limited to 1 page in length. Applicants with collaborations may include 1 additional budget page per subaward for any collaboration. You must also submit a separate budget justification. This document is limited to 2 pages in length and must detail and justify the resources you are requesting to support your project, including any subawards. If you have requested the additional $50,000 US dollars available for proposals that include new to the field collaborations, then you must also provide greater detail regarding how your collaborator meets our new to the field definition. A separate document, not to exceed 2 pages in length, is also required to describe your impact strategy. The document serves to provide a detailed description of your plans to achieve meaningful outcomes and maximize the impact of your proposed research. I encourage you to read the FAQ located within our RFP for additional information on the impact strategy document. Lastly, we provide the option to upload 1 or more letters of commitment, which are limited to 2 pages per letter. Please note that these letters are considered optional unless the principal investigator is a graduate student or a postdoctoral fellow. Eligibility for these applicants is contingent upon the inclusion of a letter of commitment to be signed by a faculty member from their higher education institution. Those letters must explicitly affirm the faculty member's commitment to act as a collaborator and advisor for the project. They must confirm the proposed research will have access to the necessary laboratory facilities. And if the applicant is a student, they must include the current aims of their dissertation and describe how the proposed research will contribute to it. When applicable, applicants should submit a letter of commitment to document any committed financial or in-kind resources for the project they will receive from either their organization or other collaborators. Those letters should define the financial or in-kind resources committed to their project and describe the collaborator's role in the project. All submitted proposals undergo a comprehensive evaluation and are evaluated using the same criteria. Our primary review criteria, the category we hold in highest regard, is originality and significance. To assess this criteria, our reviewers will assess the novelty, innovation, and transformational potential of the research, its relevance to the funding priority area, and the suitability of your proposed methodology. Moving on to our secondary review criteria, our reviewers will assess the research team based on the researcher's ability to deliver the project as proposed, including the expertise and experience of researchers and collaborators, the balance of skills within the team, and how strong, meaningful, and synergistic your collaborations are. In terms of project planning, our reviewers will look to see that you have clear, well-defined research objectives and your methods are clear, feasible, and capable of producing reliable results. Our reviewers will want to see a well-structured plan that clearly details your research stages, timeline, and any key milestones. It should also come as no surprise that our reviewers will evaluate the value of your proposed project against the financial resources you have requested from GFI. They want to see a reasonable budget for your proposed activities with rational, transparent justification. As a reminder, applicants are encouraged to submit conservative yet realistic budgets to accomplish all work as described within their proposals. Lastly, our reviewers will evaluate your project's expected impact. They will look to see how comprehensive, feasible, and creative your impact strategy is, and evaluate your work's potential for achieving a meaningful and/or broad impact on the alternative protein landscape. This concludes our presentation. We hope this information has been helpful as you consider submitting a proposal for funding consideration. By now, you may have some questions for us. If you are joining us live and have not already done so, we encourage you to submit your questions now using the question and answer box displayed at the bottom of your screen. In doing so, please label your questions as either a process question or with the specific priority area, A or B, that you are inquiring about. Additionally, I want to provide a friendly reminder that many questions are already addressed within the frequently asked questions section located at the bottom of our RFP. If you have additional questions after today's event, please read our FAQ to see if your question has been already answered. And if not, please email your question to us at rfp@gfi.org. Thank you for joining us today. We will now open the event up for a live question and answer session.
Thank you, Alicia and team. That was a really helpful review of the 2025 RFP. And we'll get into the Q&A now. So my name is Renee Bell. I'm the Senior Science Content Specialist here at GFI. And we'll spend the next 15 minutes or so answering as many of your questions as we can. So Alicia, we're going to start with process-related questions, which means you're on deck first. And could you let us know if the recording will be available to people after this webinar?
Yes, thank you for that question. And we do apologize for the technical difficulties that occurred at the beginning of our session and greatly appreciate everyone's patience as we work to resolve that issue. Today's webinar recording will be posted on our Research Grant Program webpage within the coming days, and we will be sharing instructions on how to access that recording with all attendees of today's event via a follow-up email.
People are wondering, can one group submit proposals to different priorities?
Another great question. So all of our applicants are required to submit their proposals under one specific priority area. Our priority areas do have very narrow focuses. So in doing so, you need to select the priority area that would most closely align with your project. Proposals that address both priority areas would be acceptable. However, we do not allow duplicate submissions. So it wouldn't be acceptable to submit your proposal twice, one under priority A and one under priority B. The most important thing to remember is that your proposal needs to address all of the requirements of the priority area that you do submit under. And then conversely, if you intend to submit different discrete proposals, then you would be welcome to submit more than one.
Excellent, that's helpful, thank you. Does the institute submitting the proposal need to be an R01 or can an undergrad only institution submit? Does there need to be a collaboration with an R1 institute if it's an undergrad one only?
So eligibility for our funding is not limited by the classification of your specific institute. However, it's worth noting that an undergraduate student would not meet our eligibility criteria to serve as the PI. Graduate students and postdoctoral researchers would be eligible to apply, but that would be contingent upon them including a letter of commitment from a faculty advisor, which is outlined within our RFP.
Excellent, thank you. Will proposal reviews be available for projects that aren't funded?
Yes, so we do provide anonymized reviewer feedback to proposals that are not selected for funding consideration, so long as they meet our eligibility criteria for funding consideration.
That's very helpful, thanks. And when will awardees be notified?
Great question as well. We aim to notify our applicants within about 12 weeks of the submission deadline. However, that is highly contingent upon the number of proposals we receive. So we will keep applicants informed if that timeline changes. All proposals should be ready to begin within 3 to 6 months of our submission deadline. So please keep that in mind. We'd be looking at a start date somewhere between September and November of 2025.
I think we have enough time to do a few more process questions. Could you define how GFI qualifies a new to the field collaboration to qualify for the additional $50,000 in funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So to qualify for that additional funding, your proposal needs to include at least one meaningful research collaboration with an individual who has not been previously funded for research, development, or related processes in alternative proteins before. If the collaborating new to the field individual is from your same organization, then it's also important that they represent a different skill set, expertise, or they're from a different department, which you should outline within your proposal documents.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Alicia. I think we'll move on to priority area A, considering the time. And Lucas, if you join us on screen, we can dig into some of these questions. First question, RFE sounds like it's focused on precision fermentation only. Is traditional lab fermentation out of scope?
Yeah, thanks, Renee. So yeah, LAB, lactic acid bacteria fermentation. So for this year, topic A is focused on really enabling fermentation ingredients derived from biomass fermentation and precision fermentation as ingredients produced from these. So proposals should focus on the ingredient-based ability to improve a plant-based formulation. Traditional fermentation, while it's a great approach, really relies on the transformation of a plant-based substrate during fermentation and is not the focus of the topic area this year. So we're primarily focused on biomass produced ingredients and precision fermentation produced ingredients that then go into a plant-based formulation as independent ingredients to improve the organoleptics. And then I just want to broadly reinforce that topic A, we're seeking R&D on, again, improving the organoleptic properties of meat alternatives through that formulation. So while ingredient production and bioprocess development is really, really important, we're really focused on the food science aspect in this RFP, integrating and characterizing these ingredients. And so proposals that predominantly focus on bioprocess development will be considered out of scope.
That's helpful. Thanks, Lucas. How can a product company collaborate with a service company, like a CRO? For example, one generates food ingredients but lacks protein characterization capabilities.
That's a great question, and GFI definitely encourages collaborations across organizations to help improve your research outcomes and the teaming of your proposal. Unfortunately, GFI cannot connect specific companies with specific researchers for either ingredient development, supply, or characterization, but we do encourage those collaborations. I did pop into the chat earlier, our GFI Ideas community, so you can check out that community as well as check out our ecosystem map at ecosystem.gfi.org to find potential collaborators.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Lucas. I appreciate your input here. We're going to move on to topic B questions. So Claire, if you'd like to join us on screen, can get into some of these. First question, should the proposal include all the core objectives? And for core objective 1 in the terrestrial cell lines, does the proposal need to address A through D, or can one choose one of those items?
Yes, so we are asking you to address all of the core objectives for a given pathway. And in, I believe, both pathways 2 and 3, so both the fish and the terrestrial pathways, there's under objective 1, there are some sort of sub objectives, and we are asking you to address all of them. And I also want to highlight for that question, please do make sure you're looking at the objectives for the correct pathway, because you're going to get yourself into some trouble if you're looking at pathway 3 and thinking about how to do that with crustacean cell line development. That's going to be, I will say, very ambitious. So please do make note of the specific objectives for each one, and including the wording. So there are some changes we made, even comparing the fish and terrestrial pathways. So things like, we say a doubling time, ideally under 24 hours. What that really means is we would like you to make some efforts towards achieving a faster doubling time for those cells. We realize that might be challenging, especially for cold water species. So, we tried to kind of find the right balance between being ambitious, but not asking way, way too much. So please do make sure that you're looking at those sort of nuances to the way we've worded the objectives for each of these.
Thanks for that clarification. In the RFP, you mentioned 4 projects for fish cell lines that were previously funded, but only one, TUFSMAC1 cell line, is in the GFI database. Is adding the cell line to the GFI database a new requirement? Is there any unique information you would like to see in the application from private companies regarding how we will share the cell line?
Yeah, so to clarify, there are a couple different requirements. One of those is banking the cell line in a repository. We don't say which repository you need to use. And the other is adding the cell line to the database. And the database is just a database. So we're just, asking for you to send us some kind of basic information about the cell line and say, here's where you can order it from. I believe those specific requirements are new in this particular, we haven't included those in previous RFPs from a few years ago. So that is new this year, though we do always, have some variation on the requirement that outputs from GFI's research grant program will be generally available to the research community. It's not going to be just, we're funding a cell line for use by this one particular lab. As to whether those cell lines would be out there, it depends on a lot of things. It depends on kind of how someone banked their cell line or is sharing it sort of one-off with other researchers, as well as just, how successful the project ended up being, especially for, crustacean and fish cells. There can be just, technical hurdles that mean that, well, we learned something, but we didn't get a cell line out of the project. There was a second part to that question. Oh, how do we want people to provide additional information about sharing for company applicants? So we don't have specific requirements on that front for applicants who would be coming from a company, but in general, whether you're academic or industry, we're really looking for a clear statement of how you plan to share your cell line. We want to know if there are going to be any restrictions or licensing fees or anything toward that would potentially, or if there's, potential delays in when you would be able to share your cell line. We're not trying to be overly restrictive about saying these are the exact terms, but I think a more helpful way to think about this is our broad goal in proposing this priority area is we want to increase the availability of cell lines for the cultivated meat and seafood research community, including for-profit folks in the space. So we want you to propose some method for sharing that will achieve that goal. If there are some restrictions that you need to impose based on your particular institution's requirements or your goals as a company, we are open to that. But please do think very carefully about how you're going to balance those goals with what we've told you are the goals that GFI is trying to achieve with this RFP. And I think in many cases, it should be very possible to do that.
Great. That's very helpful, Claire. Thank you. And we have a question about priority area B. Should the proposal focus just on one pathway for Focus B?
Yeah, so we are asking you to pick one of the three pathways, so either crustacean, fish, or terrestrial. And I think there was a related question about submitting two different proposals for two different pathways. So for a given proposal, we do want you to pick one of the pathways that's your primary objective, in the sense that, we want you to focus on, for example, fish cell lines, and we want you to address the core and secondary objectives that are outlined there. It is technically possible that a proposal could also include some work on, in this example, crustacean or terrestrial cells. And so what that might look like is if you had a secondary objective that was, oh, we want to compare such and such in, let's say, cow cells versus salmon cells. So in that case, you would still do your sort of core objectives for pathway 2. And then you would also have a secondary objective that includes something else. That's not necessary, and that probably won't be the case for most proposals, but it is possible that you would kind of cross those boundaries, but you would still always have a primary pathway that you're choosing. Good grants will force you to pick one. So hopefully you've structured your proposal in a way that's pretty clear. And also there was another question about submitting two different proposals that focus on different pathways. And yes, you can do that. So similar to the earlier question to Alicia about submitting proposals to both priority A and priority B. Yes, you can do that, but they would be sort of distinct proposals that would be considered separately.
Great. Thanks, Claire, for your insights on priority area B. And Alicia, I'm going to throw it back to you. There's I think an important clarifying question about, is this grant opportunity for the USA only? Are there any demographic distribution differences between the EU and USA?
Thank you for that question. Our RFP is available globally. We do not give preference to individuals in the United States. So really, we don't have any published guarantees by region. We really look to see what the scientific integrity is of each of these proposals and look to fund the best ones we receive.
Excellent. And we are at time. So thank you all for your questions. I will turn it over to Alicia for some closing remarks, who I'm sure she will let you know how to get your questions answered if they weren't.
Thank you, Renee. So thank you all once again for joining us today. We're really hoping that this session has been helpful as you prepare to submit your innovative proposals you've planned for our 2025 RFP. Just a quick reminder, the FAQ section located at the end of our RFP is really helpful and addresses a lot of common questions we receive. After reviewing that FAQ, if you still have any lingering questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email at rfp@gfi.org. So thank you all once again and have a wonderful day.